In the winter of 1849, the American dream wasn't a house with a white picket fence. It was a blood-soaked riverbed in California. But while thousands chased the glimmer of yellow metal, a silent few were chasing something far more valuable: the secrets that would determine if the United States would remain one nation or crumble into a collection of warring territories. This is not the history they taught you in school. This is the story of the gold that never reached the banks and the men who died to keep it that way. Chapter 1: The Ghost of the Sierra. The Sierra Nevada mountains did not care for human ambition. To the mountains, the thousands of men crawling over its granite skin were nothing more than ants. Elias Thorne wiped the frozen grit from his eyes. His hands, once the soft hands of a Boston clockmaker, were now blackened by permanent dirt. He wasn't here for the gold, or at least that's what he told himself when the hunger pangs grew too sharp to ignore. He was here because he was running from a ghost. In 1849, San Francisco was a city made of canvas and desperation. Ships were abandoned in the harbor, their crews having deserted the ships the moment the word Eureka hit the docks. Elias moved through the muddy streets, past the gambling dens where men lost fortunes in a single hand of faro. "Thorne!" a voice barked through the fog. Elias froze. He recognized that gravelly tone. It belonged to Captain Silas Vane, a man rumored to be working for a shadow department within the Department of State. "I heard you were dead in Coloma," Vane said, stepping out of the shadows of a makeshift saloon. "I was," Elias replied. "I found it suited me." "The President needs men who are already dead, Elias. There is a shipment of bullion leaving the southern mines, 5 tons, but it's not going to the mint in Philadelphia. There's a conspiracy involving British agents and Southern secessionists. They want to hijack the gold to fund a private army." Elias looked at his trembling hands. "I'm a clockmaker, Silas. I fix gears." "Then fix this," Vane leaned in, his voice a low hiss, "because if that gold disappears, the Union won't last until the next election. The clock is ticking for America." Chapter 2: The Sierra Vein. Leaving the soot-choked air of San Francisco felt like escaping a fever dream. Elias and Sarah moved eastward, their path carved by the heels of thousands who had gone before them. The trail was littered with the debris of broken hopes, discarded cast-iron stoves, rotting wagons, and shallow graves marked only by river stones. "You don't walk like a miner," Sarah said one evening, her voice low as they huddled over a small fire of manzanita wood. She was still wearing the oversized canvas coat and the slouch hat that hid her features. To the world, she was Sam, a quiet youth from Illinois. "And you don't talk like one," Elias countered, sharpening a hunting knife. "Most men out here speak in grunts and curses. You use the king's English like you were born to it." Sarah fell silent, the orange light of the fire dancing in her eyes. "My father was a cartographer for the Spanish crown before the Americans took California. He knew these mountains better than his own home. He knew where the old gold was, the veins the Spanish missed because they were too busy building missions." Elias paused. "Vane mentioned the southern mines. He said a shipment is moving through the Miwok trails. If Sterling's men get there first, they'll have enough leverage to buy half the governors in the east." "The Miwok trails aren't on any map, Elias," she whispered, "but they are in my head. If we want to stop Sterling, we have to go where the sun doesn't hit the canyon floor. Chapter 3. The Ghost of the Dunner Pass. The air grew thin and biting as they ascended into the high Sierras. Here, the history of California was written in ice. They passed the remains of the Dunner party's cabins, a grim reminder of what happened when the mountains decided you weren't welcome. It was here they saw the first sign of the enemy. Through his brass spyglass, Elias spotted a line of black horses moving with military precision across a ridge 3 miles out. These weren't miners. These were filibusters, private mercenaries hired by Southern interests and backed by British gold. They carried the new Colt Dragon revolvers, weapons that could fire 6 shots before a man could reload his musket. "They're moving towards the Stanislaus River," Elias noted, his heart hammering against his ribs. "We can't outrun them on the main trail," Sarah said, pointing towards a jagged split in the granite walls. "We take the Devil's Slide. It's a shortcut, but if a horse slips, it's a 500-foot drop." Elias looked at the treacherous path. He was a man of gears and balance, of delicate springs and measured time. He realized then that California was a land without balance. It was a place of extremes, extreme wealth, extreme violence, and extreme beauty. Chapter 4. The Alchemy of War. They reached the hidden encampment at the Stanislaus River just as the sun began to bleed into the horizon. Below them, in a natural stone amphitheater, sat 12 heavy wagons. These weren't filled with supplies. They were loaded with heavy wooden crates, each marked with a discreet iron seal. Elias saw Sterling standing by the lead wagon, looking at a map. Beside him was Captain Vane. The betrayal hit him like a physical blow. Vane hadn't sent him to stop the shipment. Vane had sent him as a scout to clear the way, to ensure no other government agents were in the area. "The Union is a corpse, Silas. We are simply the undertakers. Once this gold reaches the coast, the British Navy will escort it to New Orleans. By spring, the South will have the treasury it needs to secede. The Americans will be too busy fighting each other to notice they've lost the West." Elias felt a cold rage. This wasn't just about gold anymore. It was about the clocks he used to fix, the delicate mechanism of a young democracy. If these men stole the mainspring of the nation's economy, the whole machine would shatter. "Sarah," Elias whispered, reaching for a pouch of black powder he had bought in Sacramento, "how good are you at starting fires?" She looked at the wagons, then at the dry brush surrounding the camp. A grim smile touched her lips. "In this heat, it'll go up like a tinderbox." "We don't need to steal the gold," Elias said, his mind working like a master horologist. "We just need to make it impossible to move."
Chapter 5. The Molten Trap. The plan was madness. As night fell, Elias crept down the scree slope, his boots muffled by rags. He moved through the shadows of the boulders, his eyes fixed on the axle of the lead wagon. He didn't use a gun. He used his watchmaker's tools. With surgical precision, he began to unscrew the heavy linchpins of the wagons, replacing them with wooden pegs he had carved to look like iron. They would hold for a mile, maybe 2, but the moment the wheels hit the steep descent toward the coast, the wheels would fly off, sending tons of gold into the deepest ravine in the Sierras. Suddenly, a hammer clicked behind his ear. "You always were too curious for your own good, Thorne," Vane growled. Elias didn't turn around. Did they pay you in pounds or acres, Silas? What's the price for selling out a country that gave you a uniform? A country is just a line on a map, Elias. Gold is the only thing that's real. Boom! The horizon erupted in a wall of orange flame. Sarah had signaled the Miwok scouts she had encountered earlier. The dry scrub caught instantly, creating a chimney effect that roared down the canyon. In the confusion, Elias spun, knocking the revolver from Vane's hand. The two men grappled in the dirt, the heat of the fire singeing their hair. Above them, the panicked horses began to bray, and the wagons started to roll. "The pins!" Vane screamed, realizing the danger. "Stop the wagons!" But it was too late. The heavy wheels groaned. The wooden pegs Elias had installed snapped with the sound of pistol shots. The lead wagon tilted, its heavy crates shifting. With a sickening roar, the wagon tumbled over the ledge, followed by the second and the third. 5 tons of gold bullion, the wealth that was supposed to fund a civil war, disappeared into the darkness of the gorge, crashing against the rocks until the crates shattered, spilling yellow bars into the white water of the river below. Chapter 6. The River of Lost Fortune. The sound of the wagons shattering against the rocks was a symphony of destruction. It wasn't the sound of wood breaking, it was the sound of a geopolitical shift. As the crates burst, the river below, a churning artery of ice melt and silt, swallowed the wealth of 1,000 men. "My gold!" Vane roared, his face contorted by the orange glow of the encroaching fire. He lunged for Elias, but the clockmaker was no longer the soft-handed artisan from Boston. He was a man forged by the trail. Elias sidestepped the charge, using Vane's own momentum to hurl him toward the crumbling edge of the ridge. Vane teetered, his boots kicking up sparks and gravel, before he caught a jagged outcrop of rock. He hung there, suspended over the same abyss that had claimed the bullion. "Help me, Thorn," Vane gasped. "There's more gold in the hills. I can show you." Elias looked down at the man who had traded his honor for metal. "The time for deals is over, Silas. The clock has run out." He didn't push him, but he didn't reach out either. A secondary explosion, likely the mercenaries' black powder supply, ripped through the camp behind them. The vibration was the final straw. The ledge gave way, and Silas Vane vanished into the smoke-filled darkness without a sound. Chapter 7. The Silent Alliance. "Elias, we have to move!" Sarah's voice pierced the roar of the fire. She appeared through the haze, her face smeared with soot, leading 2 horses that had miraculously remained tethered. Behind her, the Miwok scouts were melting back into the tree line. They had no interest in the white man's gold, only in the removal of the invaders who had brought fire to their sacred hunting grounds. They rode hard toward the northwest, the opposite direction of the coastal trails. Sterling's surviving mercenaries would be scouring the road to San Francisco, but they wouldn't expect anyone to head deeper into the high Sierras during a firestorm. As they reached a high plateau where the air was thin and clear of smoke, Sarah pulled her horse to a stop. She looked back at the glowing orange scar on the horizon. "It's gone," she whispered, "the money that was supposed to buy a war." "It's not gone," Elias said, adjusting the strap of his satchel. "It's just in the one place where no one can spend it. The river will bury it in silt within a week. In 50 years, people will tell legends about the ghost shipment of the Stanislaus, but today it's just rocks in a stream." Chapter 8. The Price of Silence. The journey back was a grueling test of human endurance. To keep their secret, they couldn't return to the main camps. They lived off the land, eating pine nuts and the occasional rabbit, moving like shadows through the granite cathedrals of what would one day be Yosemite. During these weeks, the real history of the West unfolded around them. They passed Chinese laborers building the foundations of a new world and met 49ers who had lost everything but their pride. "When we get back," Sarah asked one night under a canopy of stars that looked like spilled diamonds, "what will you do? You can't go back to fixing clocks in Boston, not after this." Elias looked at his hands. They were steady now. "The world is changing, Sarah. The telegram is coming. The railroads are coming. They'll need people who understand how the gears of this country work, and they'll need people who can keep secrets." Chapter 9. The Fog of San Francisco. They arrived in San Francisco in autumn 1850. The city was transforming. The canvas tents were being replaced by brick and mortar. The news of California's admission as the 31st state was spreading like wildfire. It was officially a free state, a blow to the Southern interests that Sterling had served. Elias walked into a small telegraph office near the wharf. He sent a single coded message to a contact in Washington, D.C., a name Vane had mentioned before his betrayal. Message: "The shipment is secured by the earth. The mechanism is reset. The Union holds." He never received a reply, and he didn't expect one. As he walked out, he saw a figure in a fine woolen coat standing by a carriage. It was Julian Sterling. The British agent looked older, his aristocratic poise replaced by a weary bitterness. He had lost his gold, his men, and his mission. Their eyes met across the muddy street. No words were exchanged. In the world of shadows, silence was the only currency left. Sterling climbed into the carriage and vanished into the fog, most likely bound for a ship back to London to answer for his failure. Historical fact check: the secret war for the West. While many think of the gold rush as a purely economic event, it was a hotbed of international espionage. The British, French, and even the Russians had eyes on California. If the U.S. had failed to secure the territory, or if the gold had been diverted to the Confederacy a decade early, the map of North America would look very different today. The Stanislaus incident remains one of those whispered legends, a story of how two nobodies saved a superpower. The final epilogue. Elias Thorne did return to the world of gears, but not in Boston. He became one of the first special agents for the newly formed Postal Inspection Services, the precursors to modern intelligence agencies. Sarah disappeared into the history books, though some say a woman matching her description was the one who mapped the secret passes that later allowed the Union Army to move gold safely during the dark days of 1861. The gold remains in the Stanislaus River to this day, buried under 100 feet of sediment and the weight of a nation's history. Some say on quiet nights, when the moon is full, you can still hear the phantom sound of wagon wheels snapping in the wind. The saga of Elias and Sarah doesn't end with the burial of the gold. In the world of 19th century geopolitics, a secret that big has a way of haunting the living. Chapter 10. The Vigilance Committee. San Francisco in the early 1850s was a place where a man could be a king at noon and a corpse by sunset. The city was burning, literally. The great fires were becoming a seasonal ritual, often set by arsonists to mask robberies or to clear land titles.
Elias had taken up residence in a small brick-walled workshop on Montgomery Street. He spent his day